The implementation of tariffs has been a hallmark of President Donald Trump's economic policies, aimed at reshaping global trade dynamics and addressing perceived trade imbalances. With the anticipated 2025 tariff agenda, countries around the world are preparing for the potential impact of these policies. Whether in the form of counter-tariffs, diplomatic efforts, or shifts in trade partnerships, the global response to these tariffs will shape the future of international trade. This video explores the top 10 global responses to Trump's 2025 tariff agenda, focusing on how various nations and trade blocs are preparing to cope with or challenge these measures. 1. China's retaliatory tariffs. China has been one of the most vocal opponents of Trump's tariff policies, particularly in the context of the ongoing trade war between the two nations. In response to the anticipated 2025 tariffs, China is likely to implement its own retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods. These measures would target key sectors such as agriculture, technology, and manufacturing. In addition to tariffs, China may pursue other strategies, such as devaluing its currency or limiting access to critical raw materials, in an effort to protect its economy and send a message to the U.S. about the consequences of unilateral tariff impositions. 2. European Union's diplomatic efforts. The European Union, EU, has long criticized the use of tariffs as a means of economic negotiation. In response to Trump's 2025 tariff agenda, the EU is expected to engage in extensive diplomatic efforts to reach trade agreements that minimize the impact of these tariffs on European businesses. The EU may also initiate legal proceedings at the World Trade Organization, WTO, arguing that the U.S. tariffs violate international trade laws. Moreover, the EU is likely to strengthen its trade relationships with other global partners, including China and Japan, to diversify its trade networks and reduce dependency on the U.S. market. 3. Japan's strategic trade partnerships. Japan, a key ally of the U.S., faces both opportunities and challenges under Trump's 2025 tariff agenda. Japan has historically been a strong advocate for free trade and may respond to the tariff increases by pursuing new trade agreements with countries not impacted by U.S. tariffs. For example, Japan has already strengthened its ties with the EU through the Japan-EU Economic Partnership Agreement. The country may also look to bolster its economic relationship with Southeast Asia and other regional partners to mitigate the impact of U.S. tariffs on its export-dependent economy. 4. Mexico's diversification of trade relations. Mexico, as a major trading partner of the U.S., is particularly vulnerable to the effects of the 2025 tariff agenda. In response, Mexico may focus on diversifying its trade relationships with countries in Latin America, Asia, and Europe. The country has already sought to strengthen its trade agreements through the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, and other regional initiatives. Mexico may also look to boost its domestic industries and reduce dependency on U.S. imports by increasing investment in key sectors such as technology, manufacturing, and agriculture. 5. Canada's efforts to strengthen NAFTA alternatives. Canada, another key trade partner of the U.S., will likely face similar challenges to Mexico under the 2025 tariff agenda. In addition to leveraging its position in the USMCA, Canada is expected to focus on strengthening alternative trade partnerships, particularly with the European Union and Asia-Pacific countries. Canada has been active in pursuing multilateral trade agreements, such as the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, which could help shield it from the impact of U.S. tariffs by expanding its access to global markets. 6. India's focus on expanding trade with Asia and Africa. India, which has been at odds with the U.S. over trade issues in the past, is likely to take a strategic approach in response to the 2025 tariffs. India may focus on expanding its trade relations with other fast-growing economies in Asia, such as Vietnam, Indonesia, and South Korea. Furthermore, India is expected to deepen its trade ties with Africa, which is emerging as a significant market for manufacturing and agricultural products. By diversifying its trade portfolio, India can reduce its reliance on the U.S. and protect its own industries from the effects of tariff hikes. 7. Australia's efforts to balance trade partnerships. Australia, another U.S. ally, faces the dual challenge of maintaining strong ties with Washington while also protecting its economic interests in the face of rising tariffs. In response to the 2025 tariff agenda, Australia may focus on diversifying its trade relationships with countries in Asia, particularly China, Japan, and South Korea. Australia has already signed the China-Australia Free Trade Agreement, (CAFTA), and the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, (CPTPP), both of which will help offset the impact of U.S. tariffs by providing access to broader markets. 8. Brazil's focus on export growth. As a major agricultural exporter, Brazil is likely to be impacted by U.S. tariffs on agricultural products. However, Brazil may respond by focusing on expanding its exports to countries outside of the U.S. market. Brazil has already sought to strengthen trade relations with China and other key Asian economies, which are major importers of Brazilian agricultural goods. Additionally, Brazil could look to improve its infrastructure and logistics to enhance its export competitiveness and mitigate the impact of tariff-induced price hikes on U.S. goods. 9. South Korea's strategic trade alliances. South Korea, which relies heavily on exports, is expected to face challenges under Trump's 2025 tariff policies. In response, South Korea may seek to strengthen its economic ties with other global powers, particularly in Asia and Europe. South Korea already has free trade agreements with the EU, the US, and other nations, and may focus on deepening these partnerships. South Korea could also look to invest in high-tech industries, such as electronics and biotechnology, to offset the potential decline in exports to the U.S. 10. African Union's collaborative trade efforts. The African Union, comprising 55 member states, is likely to seize the opportunity to bolster its economic independence in response to the Trump administration's 2025 tariff policies. African nations have been increasingly focused on intracontinental trade through initiatives like the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, which aims to reduce trade barriers within Africa and promote economic integration. By strengthening intra-African trade, the O could mitigate the impact of tariffs imposed by the U.S. and increase the region's economic resilience. The global response to Trump's 2025 tariff agenda is shaping up to be a multifaceted effort, with countries pursuing various strategies to safeguard their economies and mitigate the impact of U.S. trade policies. From retaliatory tariffs and trade diversification to diplomatic efforts and new trade alliances, nations are working to adapt to the changing global trade landscape. While the U.S. may be driving these shifts, the global community is actively seeking new ways to collaborate and forge economic partnerships that reduce dependency on U.S. markets. The coming years will reveal the long-term effects of these tariff policies and the extent to which nations can successfully navigate the challenges posed by Trump's economic strategy.